For almost 8 weeks, Canadians have been sheltering inside, protecting themselves against a virus considered so dangerous it has forced much of the world to shut down. Now many are being told it's okay to start going out, resume work and school, as long as we keep our distance. If you're confused or worried about what to expect in this new world, our next guest says you aren't alone. Dr. Vivien Lee is a clinical psychologist in Toronto, and she joins us now. Dr. Lee, thanks for your time, as always. Let's talk about people contemplating a return to work and how normal it might be for them to feel a little stressed these days.
It's absolutely normal, especially if we haven't been working for these 8 weeks or haven't been going to an office. This is a major change, and basically any kind of change can be stressful, even if it's a positive change. But we're going from staring at our four walls, speaking to just maybe a few people in person, to all of a sudden going back out into society, maybe taking public transit, maybe driving on the highways, and going back to office where there may be many people. So of course that's going to introduce a lot of stimulation and a lot of concerns that we haven't really had for the past 8 weeks.
So you say stimulation and concerns. Give us some coping mechanisms. I'm thinking that having some sort of workflow or plan in terms of heading back might help?
So I'm assuming that many people are going to have concerns about, what are the health risks? If I'm taking public transit, what's that going to be like when going into my workplace? What safeguards and precautions have my employer put into place for me? So I would absolutely, if your employer hasn't already let you know, you can contact them and ask, hey, what has been put into place? What are the safety precautions? What's the seating arrangement going to look like? If someone is symptomatic, what's the procedure going to be? So then you know what kind of safeguards are already in place before you go in there. Same thing if you have to take public transit, for example. I think most public transit agencies have on their website what they're doing already. But if it's not on there, contact the agency, and see what kinds of precautions have been put into place. And then leading up to leaving our houses and going to work, many of us who have been working from home or haven't been able to work at all are going from a relatively small space out into the world and then following a routine that we may not have been following for the past 8 weeks. And that's a huge adjustment to go from the four walls to going out there. So I would, if you know what day the office is going to open again, I would gradually start readjusting your schedule. Start getting up around the same time you would for work. Start getting to work mode. Dress in your work clothes and sit down for the work day. I know this sounds a little artificial, but this is helping to get our bodies and minds back into work mode. And of course, look at the trusted sources. The internet and media can be overwhelming with information. Go to the trusted sources, look at what are the best practices and make sure that you're engaging in all of those, because those are the things that are directly in your control.
Those of us who have been coming into the workplace for the last number of weeks, we have a routine. We disinfect this, and we have a little route that we walk, and we've got all our shortcuts and our workflows sorted out. People coming back are going to have to develop those for themselves. So how important is it for them to understand they're going to need a little more time, and for employers to understand that it's going to take employees a while to kind of get into some kind of routine again?
So I work with many people who have been on leave from work for various reasons. And, if you've been out of the office for a while, it can be a huge adjustment. And I almost always, encourage people to start going back gradually, if possible. Of course, that's not always possible. So employers can recognize that it is a huge mental adjustment just to go from working at home or not working at all for 8 weeks to coming back into the office. Things may be a little slower to ramp up. You add in these potential anxieties and stressors about contamination and what's the workplace going to look like now, and am I going to be safe at work? So those are all going to be on people's minds coming back to work. So as an employer, the more you can be open about what you're putting into place, being a little more realistic in your expectations and demands, at least in the beginning, of what to expect from your employees, I think can go a long way in terms of maximizing success in the long run.
Let's talk about, we hope, when this is over, in the not too distant future, we hope. But let's talk about what residual anxieties and stress might continue on after there has been some, we hope, resolution to COVID-19.
Well, us returning to the new normal is a bit tricky because the new normal is going to continue to change until there is a vaccine, and then we're probably going to feel the impact of that until most of society is, or our community around us is vaccinated. Our anxieties and long-term effects it's going to vary, I think, depending on your circumstances. Certainly, if you have lost your job or finances have been a major worry throughout this, you're probably going to be feeling the lingering impacts of that for a while, financially as well as psychologically. I think many people have kind of woken up to the idea of we can't just kind of coast along and assume things will be there for us if we need it and assume that things will be okay. So I think many people will be, putting a little more thought and energy into planning ahead, financially, emotionally, physically, for their futures, realizing that some of it will be out of their hands, so they should take it wherever they can. I think many people are going to have some health anxiety leading up to after this is letting up, because we recognize that, I'm much more aware of the importance of hand hygiene and how easy it is to get infected by viruses and bacteria. So for some people, I think that may cause some lingering anxiety in terms of becoming sick, for example. But there's also the long-term positive impacts. And I think a lot of the impacts of moving forward is really going to depend on how much we can try to empower ourselves. Certainly, many people are feeling much more connected to their families. They kind of stepped out of the rat race, taking their kids to all these activities, and everyone's just kind of eating on the run. And people have been spending more quality time together at home. And so I think, recognize the importance of social connection and keeping connected with people we care about. I think that can also be a long-term positive effect of moving forward and realizing how much we need each other, and it's how difficult it can be to go it alone.
Let's leave it on that note. Thanks for this, Dr. Lee. Dr. Vivien Lee is a clinical psychologist, and she joined us from Toronto.